Dandadan is obviously everyone's favorite manga, but it has a very big problem, one that has been looming for the past 8 to 9 months. It started on September 15th, 2025. Now, to understand this problem, you don't really need to know much, so I'm not going to spoil you. However, for readers and non-readers, your opinion is very valid here. I'm curious to see what you think. Dandadan's problem is amnesia. Specifically, a character known as Momo, the main character, has currently lost her memories 200 chapters into the story. And for the past 8 to 9 months, Momo has not had any recollection of pretty much who any of the characters are, except for her grandmother and a childhood friend known as Gigi. This might not seem like a problem at first, but Dandadan is a very chaotic story. It moves very rapidly, it has a ton of different flirtatious ideas, and when you're reading it, you can understand where things can get a little bit choppy. Especially with the amount of ideas and the creativity that comes in, it's hard to keep track of everything. Here's the kicker. Around about the time Momo lost her memories, the story started to change. The story kind of evolved into its true story, quote unquote. And what this means is that the story is becoming a lot more grand, a lot more complex, and building towards a much bigger finale. Momo has not gone anywhere because of her memory loss. I've been reading this for the past 9 months, and I think a lot of people can share the same sentiment in saying that it's a bit odd. When the background of the story is moving so fast and building to so many massive conclusions, for the main character to not really do anything, to go anywhere, to experience anything, is a little bit odd. And it kind of makes you ask the question, why? Why would a talented, experienced author like Tatsu decide to give Momo amnesia? A bigger question that I found myself asking is, for someone that thinks of so many different ideas like Tatsu, why did he not think of a compelling amnesia plotline for Momo? Why is it just straight out memory loss? Why is it so simple? Why is there no real progression with it? Let's look at the issue. Memory loss in general is kind of a finicky thing to write around. I think it's difficult to really grasp how memory loss works depending on the context of your story. If you're writing a story that completely abides to the rules of memory loss and you're designing it around the purpose of memory loss, perfectly okay. But if it's something that you're adding to the story for flair or a different take or just something that you want to do, it's incredibly difficult to balance. How do you juggle all these different ideas with memory loss? And I think the reason that you find yourself juggling so many ideas is because memory loss is really anti-progression. It takes your character and brings them to a halt. This creates a really weird reading experience, especially if it's a main character. And Momo is incredibly important. She may not be the most powerful main character, but she definitely is the most audacious, meaning that she's willing to do pretty much anything and everything to get the job done and provides a plethora of characteristic charm to these type of approaches. 8 months have gone by with her not remembering anything, and it is very daunting to read. Seeing her interact with characters that she's bonded with for the past handful of years suddenly feel like it's going down the drain because of her memory loss is not a fun thing to read week to week. The weekly experience does not help either. It's like a constant iteration and reminder that she does not have memories. Out of all the things that you could add to memory loss, what do you think is the one thing that Dandadan does to try and alleviate that burden just a little bit? If you guessed the complications to the romance between Momo and Okarun, the other main character, you are correct. That is meant to be the alleviating factor to her memory loss. To see the trials and tribulations, to watch them hypothetically fall in love again. The issue, it doesn't actually work that way, nor does it even come across that way. The funniest thing about Momo's memory loss is that while it does horrible things to her character and doesn't really provide any sort of development for her or even Okarun or their romance or this idea that they're going to fall in love again, however, it did open up a couple of pathways to other characters getting moments to shine, which is kind of odd. Gigi, for example, has a moment in here that is kind of interesting for his character, but I also don't really know how I feel about it with the grand context of the situation. Gigi is kind of making moves and progressing kind of weirdly and feeling very emotionally vulnerable to the idea that Momo doesn't have her memories and now it feels like it's his chance to finally make a move. That feels kind of weird. On the other side, however, you have someone like Ira who is also kind of taking advantage of the situation, not by utilizing Momo as a weapon, but more so utilizing Okarun, spending time with him and trying to understand him. And you get a really nice moment with Ira and Okarun where she realizes that she doesn't really have to be anybody else. She doesn't have to try and be fake or to play up to what Okarun is interested in, but instead just being herself is the best thing that can happen. And regardless of her feelings, if they're going to come across and they're going to be heard, being herself is important. And I found that very lovely. The thing is, it's weaponized through Momo's memory loss, but it never had to be. These type of situations or developments could have happened within any arc. And that leads to pretty much the biggest complaint between Momo and Okarun themselves. For something that is meant to alleviate the stress of memory loss and the decaying factor of it where it doesn't really go anywhere, their romance is fickle. It's been 8 months, they're not really falling back in love, and they're kind of bombarded with the chaoticness of the rest of the story. They don't really have a chance to interact, and that's funny enough been a common theme throughout the entire story. The kids never really have time to interact with each other, just vibing or turning it into a slice of life because they're dealing with so much weirdness and cosmic threats. Now that you have amnesia in play, it slows down that process even more. There's a really easy fix here, and one that I feel like maybe Tatsu completely overlooked or just didn't even think about. If they were going to write a amnesia plotline, the easiest way to alleviate a lot of the burden and stress of it is to have memories slowly trickle out. So she would start to slowly remember certain characters, and that provides a pseudo progression. It's not necessarily new, but it does add sparks every other week. Imagine once a month she remembered certain characters, but the last person on that list would be Okarun. So you would naturally build up, she remembers this character, she remembers that character, this thing, that thing, and then the only person she doesn't remember is Okarun, and that would lead to a nice crescendo where she would finally remember and you could build around. Does that make sense? Now you're probably wondering, what's the payoff? Does Tatsu have an end goal to this amnesia? He probably does, but it's probably not going to be as well received as he might imagine. Mostly because nothing has really gone into it. It completely relies on the already pre-established development of both Momo and Okarun and their relationship. And while that moment will be emotional and very fulfilling, kind of serves as a reminder of how dysfunctional an amnesia plotline actually is, and how the story most likely would have benefited better with her not even going through it. Like I said before, I do find it very odd because Tatsu has a weird ability to write very emotional moments. He doesn't do it all too often, but when he does like to explore them, whether it be with side characters or main characters, he gives them a little bit of room to breathe, and he's able to draw out a ton of emotion. He makes you care so deeply about really sensitive and horrifying and traumatizing topics, and I think the way he depicts it is really poetic. It's really beautiful, and when he gets in his bag to do those things, the result is usually exceptional. When Momo lost her memories, he was in his bag. It was a very emotional moment. The payoff for it was sublime. And maybe that's what he was just trying to accomplish, to reach that crescendo of emotional pull to make you care so much about Momo losing her memories that anything that comes after doesn't really matter, as long as within this moment it's as impactful as it can be. And perhaps he was right, because everything that came after, just not all too great. Now, where does this end? What does the finale of this look like? To be honest, I'm not too sure. It's not like we're really building up to Momo getting her memories back, but I also don't think Tatsu would hard commit to Momo not having her memories anymore. So eventually, they will return. And I think you'll start seeing probably bits and pieces of it within the next couple of months. I don't know how much longer he wants to draw out this type of path, but I hope that he's getting the feedback that it's not really landing the way that he most likely intended. The stuff within the background, while interesting, is kind of difficult to care about because Momo not having her memories is such a big deal and it distracts the whole flow of the story almost. She's pivotal, the main character. Her interaction with these things is usually the most interesting part about it. Her learning or figuring things out, how to navigate the weirdness, the wackiness of a scenario and how to get the right answers to reach a proper conclusion is what's fun. The exploration is fun. Now that you don't have that, no one is really filling that void, and the subtle romance slice of life that we have going is drained to a weird, pulpy situation, and it can really just feel like a slog to get through. If you yourself, someone you know, or maybe you come across memory loss in another story, there's so many ways to go about it to make it functional, to make it work, to make it believable. And really, a lot of the amnesia storyline comes down to emotional sway. How can you make the emotional vulnerability between the characters interacting with someone with amnesia viable? And how can that be read well through readers? You have to give them a reason to care. You have to give them a reason to continue to care. And thus you bring in complications with amnesia. Thus you bring in hiccups. Thus you bring in massive turning points and developments. It helps if the actual story is rotating around amnesia. If you don't really have much else going on, it's the primary focus. But if you have all of these things in the background, it's going to be swallowed very easily. This isn't me trying to hate on the idea that Touch is going for. I just don't think it landed the way he wanted it to, and I think it's something that he should probably tie up relatively soon. I think it's more of a detriment and doing more damage to his story overall, and just getting out of it will feel like a sense of relief. Thank you for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. I'd truly appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye. Mwah.